Hello, everyone. Welcome to Brewing Talks, a show that covers every topic about brands, marketings, ideas, businesses, and of course, the most trending topics about different things. I'm very glad to see that we are on season 2 now, and it's going to be an amazing lineup of industry experts who's going to be on my show. And I am Madhulika, your host for the show. I'm a podcaster. I'm a businesswoman, and I'm a very passionate marketer. But for today's episode, I'm also a very passionate traveler, because today's topic is going to be highlighting, and focusing a lot on what's hot for the travel industry. And I couldn't think of a better name when I was thinking of who to invite for this particular episode than Mallika Bhagat from Times Now. So first of all, Mallika, welcome to Brewing Talks.
Hi Madhulika, thank you so much for having me.
Great. It's a pleasure, Mallika, to have you on the show, because you've been handling the travel industry as a subject, as a topic for many years, several years, and now you are associated with Times Now as a features writer, specifically focusing on lifestyle and also the travel industry. So, it'll be great to hear you and seek your inputs and insight. So, we start this topic about how the travel industry overall has shaped up over the years, especially the post-pandemic, that we have seen a lot of changes happening in the way consumers and travelers look at travel, and what's buzzing. But before that, a little bit about yourself, Mallika. How do you see being a traveler? I'm sure at the same time, how do you see from your lens about how the travel industry is shaping up today?
I kind of grew up on travel, right? My parents are teachers, so they would take us out every summer and winter vacation for trips around the country. So I've kind of grown up consuming a lot of travel content and also writing a little on the side while I was in school. Cut to today when I'm actually covering travel full time. And what I'll tell you, what has changed in the last couple of years that I've been traveling is that a lot of the travel decisions earlier, while they were taken by our parents, I think my generation specifically, and the Gen Zs, of course, a generation younger to me, have kind of taken that responsibility into their own hands. They want to decide when and where they want to travel. And I think that's a growing market that the industry as a whole is also trying to tap into.
Right.
That there is a younger market with more dispensable income that are willing to spend on experiences instead of saving. And I'm not saying that they're not saving
Correct.
money, but they're also more keen on investing in experiences that enrich them as people. I think that is one thing that has changed, and we've seen that change very rapidly post-pandemic. So, of course, the whole idea of revenge travel as a concept was kind
Yes.
of came into the fore right after the pandemic. 2 years of being cooped up in houses and going through the worst time in our lives. I think people took to traveling and realized that, okay, fine, we just have one life. Why not spend it experiencing more things and more people? So I think
Right.
that kind of came to the fore, especially post-pandemic.
Okay, wonderful. So what's trending in the travel industry? So I'm using the word trending because it's so synonymous with everything we do today. So what according to you is something that you did mention that it's all about experience today. But anything else that you would like to highlight, Mallika, as to what is, and also how the second part of this question would be how brands are looking at, because capitalizing at these opportunities like offbeat destinations, you see different boutique concepts coming
Right,
up, even from a
absolutely.
hospitality point of view, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. So there are a couple of terms that are constantly being thrown around when it comes to when we discuss travel trends as a concept, and they keep on changing, they keep on reinventing themselves. So one thing that I feel has really picked up in the travel space is domestic tourism. And I think people are really choosing
Interesting.
to go local when it comes
Okay.
to their own country. So a couple of years ago, maybe a European vacation was on everybody's mind. And I'm not saying that it isn't today, but a lot of people today are investing in exploring their own country, which is why you see the concept of offbeat destinations within India coming to the fore. And that kind of has led to another kind of peril that we can, touch upon later, which is over tourism. And nothing is offbeat anymore, nothing is unique anymore because of social media. And I think social media has become key in driving what the travel industry is today, both in terms of consumption, uh, also in terms of where we go, what we see, and how we experience and engage with our community. So domestic tourism, I think has picked up. It also goes to the credit of our government, our travel content creators, influencers that we see around us, and of course travel writers, that they're highlighting beautiful things that you can see within your own space that is not only sustainable but also promotes development of your local community, right? So if you, let's say, instead of a European vacation, you choose to, let's say, explore maybe Dwarka, which we heard a lot about. They're trying to promote Dwarka as a tourist destination. They're trying to promote diving in Dwarka, and you wouldn't have heard of the city beyond its location as one of the Char Dhams in India. You would not have heard of it as a diving destination, but that has come up, and I think that is what's happening with a lot of destinations around the country. So domestic tourism, again, after Ayodhya, once the temple was open, so spiritual tourism is a subset of domestic tourism that is really picked up. People are choosing to travel to temples, whether they are prominent temples or smaller temples around the country, whether they are spiritual cities like Varanasi, Ayodhya, there's Tirupati. Places like these are also featuring on the itineraries of Indians, both young and old. Uh, then I think one more trend, which I am very surprised and happy that has made it to the list, is wellness tourism. Um, why I say I'm very surprised is because as a young middle class person, when my parents would take us out, our idea was to pack as much as we could into the 3 4 days that we had at a destination, and then to just maybe see 2 3 spots in one city before moving on to the next city. What wellness tourism has done is allowed you to kind of put up your feet in one place and say, okay, fine, I'm here, let me explore this place. There's a lot of focus on reconnecting with yourself, both on a spiritual level, on a physiological level, which is why you have spa retreats that are coming up in India very prominently. I had never heard of spa retreats. And in the last 2 3 years, they've sprung up in every corner of the country. You have Vipassana retreats that allow you to kind of find your center as a traveler. So it's not just about tick marking in beautiful spots in the country, it's also about uh, just putting yourself at rest in a place and allowing you to connect with yourself as a traveler. So there's slow travel, which is my next point, that is also coming up as a really big trend. So slow travel allows you to not rush through a spot, but to sustainably explore a destination, which kind of brings the idea of, let's say, you use a more sustainable ways to travel. Instead of taking a flight to a destination, you take a train to there, which is of course more sustainable than flights, not entirely sustainable by itself. Then you look at eco-friendly, places to stay at. You go on walks, you explore local regional cuisine. So all that becomes a subset of slow travel, which is also kind of, I think, picking up in the domestic market.
When you mention about the slow travel, like how we say there's a concept of slow living also beginning to catch up
Absolutely,
pace, right?
absolutely.
Is it confined to a specific age group, Malika, or like is it more towards the matured lot of audience or travelers, or is it also now getting popular in the younger lot as well?
So
Like
while I
absorbing one moment at one, like mindful travel in a way.
Of course, of course.
Mhm.
While I do not have the numbers on what is the age
Okay.
cohort that takes up to slow travel as a concept, but what
Mm-hmm.
I've read over the last couple of months is that the younger generation, considering
Mm-hmm.
that they consume a lot of information, are more mindful of sustainability as a concept within
Okay.
travel also. So you
Okay.
had sustainability, of course, with food, but now you understand that there is the idea of sustainable travel, which is better for the environment, better for the planet as a whole.
Okay.
Considering
Interesting.
that younger people are traveling more,
Yes.
they're also more mindful of slow travel as a concept. So I see my peers looking at multiple hotels and then trying to figure out whether they are compliant with sustainable policies, whether they employ local resources, local people, whether they give back to the local community, whether they support environmental causes within their area, and also then to choose tour operators who are more mindful of local experiences, who curate personalized itineraries. So I think that also has kind of picked up, especially within the younger Gen Z, Gen X, millennial travelers as a whole.
Okay. So, Malika, tell me just a question that came to my mind when I was listening to you, that all these trends, whether it's spa retreats, whether it's, offbeat destination marketing or whatever, how does this, how does this get more popular? In the sense, how does one think about, getting into these concepts? Is it somewhere that there's a global inspiration coming out, or is it something you just think that, okay, you want to get into this and it starts picking up pace and then it starts getting viral and everybody starts following, the same trend?
Right.
So what's the origin of these travel trends that we are seeing? You've spoken a lot, right, about different
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
So is there a source of inspiration or a source of reference, I would say?
I think it's that's a really good question. I think it's I'm also quite a young person who's traveling very regularly. I think it is multiple factors put into one. I think it's generational change. Our parents' relationship with money, with experiences with travel, was very different than ours. I think we, because of course we've grown up in a social media age, we're more aware of the experiences that we can have, and we are willing to chalk out time from our daily routine to make that happen. I think when I speak for myself, my parents were very focused on their jobs, their careers, and raising a family. I think my generation in particular, and then younger people, are choosing to prioritize those experiences over everything else, or at least having a wholesome balance between the two. That I think then disposable income is a very big reason why
Yes.
younger people today are choosing to travel, are investing in these experiences that eventually become trends, right? I mean, nobody asked me to invest in slow travel. Nobody will ask you to go to
Correct.
a spa retreat. It's just something that you consume and
Hmm.
you come to realize, oh yeah, this is something I can also do, right?
Right, right.
This kind of brings us to a point where personalization comes into play. So, personalization is central to almost every kind of travel experience there is today.
Hmm.
Uh, People today don't want to stick to, typecast itineraries to a particular destinations. They want to personalize their experience around what they like and what they don't, which
Yeah.
is why we have these trends today. So, if I am interested in, let's say, exploring national parks, I can always partner up with a tour agency that makes that more wholesome. Go to a retreat, let's say, a nice jungle retreat in Corbett that's also sustainable. Then they organize heritage walks and nature walks and village walks around with local community in play. So that kind of makes that experience more personalized, and that is something I've seen a lot of young people opt for. So this is why we have these trends. I think post-pandemic, for example, everybody as a collective whole realized that we need to focus more on ourselves as people or more on our health, which is why people started opting for spa retreats or wellness retreats, or just leave the cacophony of the city life and go to the hills for a while. That kind of gave rise to wellness tourism as a whole, or maybe sleep tourism also for that matter. People were so sleep deprived within the pandemic with their hustle bustle of daily life that they actually coined a term for people who were willing to go and invest in places which would let them sleep at ease.
Sleep.
It is such a surprising concept, but
It
you
is.
have to realize that there are people around you that are realizing, okay, fine, I'm missing out on this in life. And if I take a vacation, I might as well get something that I'm not getting in daily life. That gave rise to sleep tourism as a concept, which is
Right.
also picking up quite a bit. I think
Wow.
Barwara, for example, in India, Fort Barwara in Rajasthan, they have a proper sleep program that they organize that is aimed to kind of helping people have better nightly routines, and then they kind of mix it up with multiple Ayurvedic therapies to kind of relax your gut, because everything is connected, right? If you're not sleeping well, and it is as physiological as it is psychological. So they kind of mix everything together to bring their sleep tourism thing in place. So that's just about it, yeah.
Very interesting, actually. So, I think the biggest thing that we understand from the post-pandemic travel trend is that I think not just in India, globally, people have become very conscious about where they
Absolutely.
spend their time, right? It's not going to be about running around from one place to the other and just not being able to be present at the moment. So, I think that trend is going to stay for a while now, and I
Absolutely,
think it's here to stay.
100%. 100%.
Correct,
Social
correct.
media, I think, also has played a really big part. Every second person that I see on social media is planning a trip. And I think that kind of also,
Yes.
I think that's one more thing that has kind of given rise to these trends is social media has allowed us to view the lives of others and then aspire to that life. And that also makes us want to travel more. If I see 10 of my friends traveling, I would
Yes.
also want to pack my bags and go on a
Correct,
vacation.
correct,
So
correct.
that kind of aspirational lifestyle, courtesy content creators and influencers that we follow so much, has kind of made us aspirational towards the lifestyle and emulate that, whether in small, palatable bites, maybe small weekend vacations, but we do want that lifestyle. So I think
True.
that also social media kind of has promoted travel as a really big global market.
Great. And I think as we speak, since this show also focuses on businesses and brands, I think it's also like we see a lot of these offbeat destinations or like wellness or, any such concept that's growing in the travel industry. The way they promote it also and the way they talk about it is also completely experiential. So it's all about
Absolutely.
visuals, it's all about
Absolutely.
content, and that's sort of, playing a big role. I
Absolutely.
just want to now give one emphasis to a very very important point because you spoke about how India and domestic tourism is getting very very strong. Do you see any challenges, Mallika? And this comes maybe from a little bit from a journalistic point of view. Do you see some challenges because this crowd everywhere, the flights are full,
Yeah.
the road trips are also getting crazy.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of hoshposh, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day. So, do you see there is a way to tackle this better? Or I know this question may have different aspects to it, right? There's a lot of infrastructure related things that we need to discuss. But for this platform, do you see how things can get better from a travel and tourism perspective? Because if domestic tourism has to be focused on, it should be branding itself pretty well, right? It has to see and how it is seen globally at the same time. So do you see some challenges in this area currently?
I do actually. I think over tourism as a concept, I think is one of the biggest challenges that we as an industry face. And I don't mean that locally or domestically. I also mean that as a global challenge that the tourism industry is facing. Whether that's an added pressure on natural resources, or whether that's added pressure on infrastructure and local communities. I mean, you must have heard about uh, Japan dealing with over tourism and putting, daily cap on number of visitors to Mount Fuji, or Barcelona residents spraying water guns on travelers in the city because they want them to go back. Venice is implementing 100 different measures to deal with the amount of people that come to that place every single day. Then again in India, everything that you must have read about in the last 1 month, the amount of people who've reached Kedarnath for that matter this year, the crowds, the videos that came out of people crowding around a very small pass in the mountains. Uh, all that points to the fact that, of course, people are traveling and that's a great thing, but there's a lot of concentration of resources, of people, of infrastructure in very small, very fragile ecosystems, especially, for example, in India's mountains. What happened in Wayanad, for example, it all happens when really fragile ecosystems are pressured by the sheer number of people that are not meant to stay there. Uh, I think the only solution to that would be to focus on other destinations, and that is a conversation that I've had with multiple stakeholders in the space. There are foundations, for example, Rare India, that focuses on sustainable travel quite a bit, and their efforts are focused in that direction. They want to bring up smaller destinations within the country into the foreground. Instead of, let's say, Agra as an epicenter for travel, you could also direct some of that travel into, let's say, Fatehpur Sikri as a smaller destination. There's Bharatpur that not a lot of people visit. Everybody just comes to Agra, goes to Taj Mahal, goes to Delhi, Red Fort, and moves out. You could filter that traffic into smaller regional destinations, but for that you have to invest in infrastructure. Now, Ayodhya has the temple that's come up, and you can obviously imagine the amount of people that are going to head to Ayodhya every single day now onwards. So the government obviously has put measures into place. They're building hotels to deal with the amount of crowd that will come in. They'll have to obviously eventually put a cap on the number of people who can visit. Varanasi is barely walkable at any point in time in the year. So they'll have to eventually try to direct some of that traffic into smaller, regional, really offbeat destinations by putting their local qualities on the map. You have to eventually move towards smaller cities and put them on the map in order to direct some of this over tourism traffic that kind of congregates in one small place in a small district in a state. And that happened especially in the hills, I think. Though we really need to start moving away from our mountains. The amount of trash that we as a whole, and I don't talk about just Indians, I think we as a world, the amount of trash that we've left up on our mountains, which is such ecologically sensitive places, it has to be dealt with. Mount Everest, how can anybody and everybody climb Mount Everest today? If you just have the right amount of money, you can make your way. And that is not what the place was intended for. It was supposed to be a really arduous journey that only a few really experienced people could make. But today you have people who carry your luggage, and all you have to do is trek your way up the mountain, and there's a line of people waiting to take the picture at the summit. While it's of course commendable that people can climb that mountain, I know I never could, but it's still such a daunting thought to imagine that there's so much trash at the base camp. I remember somebody wrote that it looks like the aftermath of a concert, and it should break your heart, the amount of rubbish that we're leaving up at such sensitive places. So I think that eventually will happen only when you have measures in place to restrict tourists in some places. I think that will eventually have to happen.
True. I think yes. I think this is like a extremely critical area and a very, very important aspect of how to sustain what we are creating or what we are selling or what we are branding, right? I think this was an amazing input and insight from you, Mallika, and it gives a very different perspective to the way we look at travel, where the countries and the nations are making billions of money and dollars out of, tourism industry. At the same time, I think when you spoke about slow living and slow travel, it's equally important to understand the part that it's also important for businesses, brands, and travelers to be mindful about the way they travel also, right?
Absolutely.
For keeping aspects about how they need to, cherish and nurture the areas and the surroundings around them. And that's a big organizational responsibility. That's a big individual responsibility for all of us.
Absolutely. It has to start global and then maybe filter down into local places. Ideally, everything should start small. There are individuals doing great work, I believe, in this space of travel. And those smaller individuals have to inspire the larger public. And I think we as travelers have to be more mindful of what we're doing, where we're heading. And it's not always as easy as people make it sound out. To be sustainable travel is extremely hard. Every flight you take has a carbon emission. And it's just making those small changes can eventually lead to a ripple effect. The question is whether we can act fast enough to actually make a difference.
Right. Perfect. So I think as we progress further and as travel is going to grow from here on, it's going to be a never ending story, and we really hope it continues this way and grows. But I think it's equally important to keep paying attention to these aspects so that, we all benefit out of it, and it becomes a very collective responsibility for organizations, for brands, for businesses who are related with industry. It was amazing to have you on the show, Mallika. Some very interesting inputs that you spoke about to do with different aspects of tourism growing in the country or globally, the different trends that we spoke about. And I'm sure it's going to be a great takeaway for all of us, whether it's to do with how you want to plan something in this industry or what you take away as a simple traveler. Thank you once again, Mallika, and pleasure having you on our show.
Thank you so much for actually considering me worthy of your
platform. Come on. It's a pleasure. Very, very interesting insights from you, Mallika. Trust me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Brewing Talks. Thank you for tuning in.
Sign up and subscribe to Brewing Talks on eplog.media. You can also listen to this podcast on Ghana, Spotify, Apple, and Google. Catch up soon with our very next episode as I stir up marketing stories only on Brewing Talks.